200 बच्चे क्यों नहीं कत्ल किए, 100 क्यों, इंतकाम कर रहे थे ना, इंतकाम कर रहे थे।
मेरे पास आज भी इतने पैसे थे कि मैं ये सिलसिला जारी रख सकता।
Somewhere in this city, a man was waiting. He wasn't hiding in shadows. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was just a man. A businessman. A neighbor. Someone fathers trusted with their children. But in November 1999, this man walked into a newspaper office in Lahore, Pakistan, and handed them a letter. A confession. A letter that would horrify an entire nation. He told them he had murdered 100 children. He told them where to find the bodies, or rather, what was left of them. Because Javed Iqbal hadn't just killed these children. He had dissolved them in acid until nothing remained. This is the true story of the most prolific serial killer in Pakistani history. And by the end of this video, you will understand not just what he did, but why. And why that answer is far more disturbing than the crimes themselves. Who was Javed Iqbal? Lahore. The cultural heart of Pakistan. A city of 6 million people, ancient Mughal architecture, bustling bazaars, and an invisible population. Street children. In the 1990s, Pakistan's economic struggles had pushed thousands of children onto the streets of Lahore. Runaways. Orphans. Children from broken homes. Boys who shined shoes, swept markets, begged at traffic lights, surviving on almost nothing, noticed by almost no one. And Javed Iqbal Mughal knew this. He was born in 1956 into a reasonably comfortable family in Lahore. By the 1990s, he ran a modest business repairing chains and engines. He was known in his neighborhood. Ordinary. Forgettable. Exactly the kind of man no one suspects. But Javed Iqbal had a secret that had been festering for years. In 1998, just 1 year before his killing spree, Javed Iqbal was accused of sexual assault by 2 young boys in his neighborhood. The case went to police. And here is where Pakistan's story becomes more complex. The case was poorly handled. Javed Iqbal claimed he was being falsely accused. He was humiliated. He felt the community had turned against him. Whether those accusations were true or not, and many investigators believe they were, what is documented is that something cracked inside Javed Iqbal in 1998. He later told investigators, "I had been dishonored. No one cared. So I decided that no one would care about these children either." He chose his victims with that rage in mind. Every single one of his victims was a street boy. A runaway. A child that the system had already abandoned. Javed Iqbal didn't see them as people. He saw them as proof. Proof that no one would look. No one would notice. No one would care. He was right. For over a year, no one did. Lahore's invisible children. To understand how Javed Iqbal operated for so long without detection, you have to understand the world his victims lived in. Pakistan in the late 1990s had, by some estimates, over 1.5 million street children. In Lahore alone, the number was in the tens of thousands. These children existed in a shadow economy. They weren't in school. They didn't have ID. Many didn't even have parents who knew exactly where they were on any given night. When one of these children disappeared, there was often no one to file a report. And even when reports were filed, underfunded local police, overwhelmed by crime in a rapidly growing city, rarely followed up on missing street children with any urgency. Javed Iqbal understood this system perfectly. He would approach boys at bus stations, train platforms, and markets. He had the look of a friendly uncle. He offered food, money, a place to sleep, a job. All the things these children desperately needed. He brought them to his home on Ravi Road in Lahore. According to his own confession and the testimonies of individuals who knew him, Javed Iqbal sometimes had accomplices, young men he had previously groomed, who helped him lure victims. He built a network of trust around himself. A small, horrifying ecosystem of exploitation. Once a child entered that house on Ravi Road, they never left. The house of no return. The house itself was nothing remarkable. 2 stories. Standard construction. A workshop on the ground floor where Iqbal repaired machinery. A living space above. But in the back of that workshop, investigators would later find evidence of something monstrous. A large metal vat. Chemicals. And a floor drain, stained with something investigators preferred not to think about too long. Javed Iqbal had turned his own home into a facility. Not a dungeon. He wasn't dramatic. He was methodical. Industrial. He treated what he was doing the way a man treats a job. And for 16 months, from approximately June 1998 to November 1999, he went to work. 100 times. 100 times, the methodology of evil. I want to be clear about something before this next section. We are not going to dwell on suffering for shock value. What I'm going to describe is what investigators confirmed, because understanding the mechanics of how Javed Iqbal operated is what reveals the most disturbing truth about this case. Which is this: he was organized. Deliberate. He kept records. Javed Iqbal kept a diary. In that diary, he recorded the name, approximate age, and date of each victim. 100 entries. Written in neat Urdu script. Like a ledger. Like a businessman recording transactions. Investigators who later examined the diary described it as one of the most disturbing documents they had ever handled, not because of graphic descriptions, but because of its complete absence of emotion. There was no rage in those pages. No remorse. No excitement. Just accounting. The process. Javed Iqbal would lure his victims, all boys between the ages of approximately 6 and 16, to his home. He would assault them. And then he would strangle them. Then came the step that made this case uniquely horrifying even among serial killer cases worldwide. He used industrial acid, hydrochloric acid, investigators believe, to dissolve the bodies. Completely. The acid was contained in a large drum or vat. After dissolution was complete, the remaining liquid was disposed of through the household drainage system. This meant there were no bodies. No bones. No DNA. No evidence that these children had ever existed at all. No remains to bury. No graves for families to visit. No closure. He also kept personal items from some victims, clothing, small belongings, which investigators found in the home. Combined with his diary and photographs he had taken, this constituted the only proof that many of these children had ever passed through that door. Why 100? This is a question criminologists have debated. Was 100 a symbolic target? Did Javed Iqbal count deliberately? Did he stop because he reached his goal? In his confession letter, Javed Iqbal himself addressed this. He wrote that he had chosen the number 100 as a deliberate act of revenge against the society he believed had humiliated him. He wanted to make a statement that could not be ignored. He wanted people to know that 100 children had been taken and no one had noticed. He wanted to embarrass the police, the government, Pakistani society. And with his confession letter, that is exactly what he did. The letter that shocked the world. November 30th, 1999. Lahore. A man walks into the offices of Jang, one of Pakistan's most widely read Urdu language newspapers. He hands the receptionist a sealed letter addressed to the editor. He leaves before anyone really looks at him. When the editor opens the letter, the newsroom goes silent. The letter was written in Javed Iqbal's own hand. It identified him by name. It gave his address. It described the crimes in clinical detail. It named the number, 100. And it ended, and this is the part that still chills investigators decades later, it ended with a direct message to the police and to Pakistani society. He wrote, in essence, I have committed these crimes. I am not afraid of death. I am ready to be executed. But know this, I cried for help once, and no one came. These children cried for help, and no one came. We are the same, except I am still alive. A second letter was sent simultaneously to the Lahore police. They arrived at his home on Ravi Road. What they found there confirmed everything. The diary. Photographs of victims. Clothing. The acid drum, empty, but with traces that forensic teams would later analyze. The rooms where unspeakable things had happened. Javed Iqbal himself was not there. He had fled. The manhunt. The news broke across Pakistan like a thunderclap. The story was picked up internationally, the BBC, CNN, newspapers across Europe and the United States. The phrase serial killer was suddenly being typed in the same sentence as Pakistan in newsrooms around the world. Pakistani authorities faced enormous pressure. How had this gone undetected for over a year? Where were the police when these children went missing? Why had no one connected the disappearances? A manhunt was launched. Javed Iqbal had also sent a letter to the local police directly taunting them, essentially saying, "You won't catch me." He was wrong. On December 30th, 1999, almost exactly 1 month after his letters were delivered, Javed Iqbal was arrested. He was found in Lahore, not far from where the crimes had taken place. He did not resist. He reportedly seemed calm, composed, as if he had been waiting. The trial, justice Pakistani style. The trial of Javed Iqbal became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in Pakistan's history. People packed the courthouse. Protests erupted outside, some demanding the death penalty immediately, others pointing fingers at the government for systemic failure. Inside the courtroom, Javed Iqbal maintained a composure that disturbed observers. He didn't rage. He didn't weep. He confirmed his confession calmly. He said, on record, that he felt no remorse. 2 accomplices were also arrested, young men who had allegedly helped him lure victims. Their trials ran parallel to his. The sentence. In March 2000, Judge Ala Bakhsh Ranja delivered a sentence that was, to put it mildly, unusual. Javed Iqbal was sentenced to death. But not just any execution. The judge sentenced him to be publicly strangled 100 times, once for each victim, and then to have his body cut into 100 pieces, and dissolved in acid. A mirror of what he had done to his victims. The international human rights community erupted. Amnesty International condemned it. Legal scholars called it unconstitutional. Human Rights Watch issued statements. But inside Pakistan, a significant portion of the public supported it. Here is the ethical tension at the heart of this case. When someone commits crimes of this scale, of this nature, against society's most vulnerable, children who had nothing, what does justice look like? Is a clinical lethal injection justice? Or does it feel like the crime and punishment exist on completely different moral planets? I'm not here to tell you the answer. But I want you to sit with the question. In any case, the sentence was never carried out as described. The death of Javed Iqbal, and the questions that remain. On October 8, 2001, less than 2 years after his arrest, Javed Iqbal was found dead in his cell at Kot Lakhpat jail in Lahore. His accomplice, Sajid, was found dead in the same prison on the same day. Both deaths were ruled suicides. 2 people. Same prison. Same day. Both involved in the same case. Pakistani authorities stated that Javed Iqbal had hanged himself using his own clothing. Prison officials faced no formal inquiry. The case was, essentially, closed. But investigators, journalists, and legal observers immediately raised questions. The conspiracy theories. Theory 1. Javed Iqbal was killed on the orders of powerful people he could have implicated. He had, at various points, suggested that he had been assaulted himself by influential individuals in Lahore, and that his killing spree was connected to a profound sense of injustice around that experience. Some investigators worried he had information that could embarrass powerful figures. Theory 2. Prison authorities, facing enormous public pressure and international scrutiny over the unconstitutional sentence that could never legally be carried out, decided the simplest solution was to make the problem disappear. Theory 3, the simplest, is that the official account is correct. That Javed Iqbal, a man who had himself stated he was ready to die, took his own life rather than face an indefinite wait on death row. We may never know which theory is true. No independent forensic investigation was conducted. The prison records from that period are incomplete. And no whistleblower has ever come forward with concrete evidence of foul play. What we are left with is the unsatisfying truth that plagues so many of these cases. The man who ended 100 lives had his own life end in murky, unresolved circumstances. 100 families never got full justice. And the questions around his death added one more layer of unresolved pain to an already bottomless tragedy. Inside the mind, what made Javed Iqbal? This is the part of the video where I usually get the most messages in the comments. Because people want to understand. They want a reason. They want to be able to point at something and say, that is why this happened. That is the factor. Fix that, and monsters like this don't appear. The uncomfortable truth is that the psychological profile of Javed Iqbal doesn't offer that clean explanation. The Grievance Narrative. Javed Iqbal's own stated motivation was grievance. He felt humiliated by the accusations against him in 1998. He felt the community, the police, and Pakistani society had failed to give him justice, or even a fair hearing. This is what criminologists call a grievance narrative, a story a person tells themselves where they are the victim, and the crimes they commit are a form of rebalancing the scales. It's worth noting, many people experience humiliation, injustice, and trauma without harming anyone. The grievance narrative doesn't cause serial murder. What it does is provide the perpetrator with a psychological permission structure. A framework in which they can tell themselves the violence is justified. The targeting pattern. His choice of victims is psychologically revealing. He chose children who were already marginalized, already invisible. This was partly practical. They were less likely to be reported missing. But it also reflects a worldview in which these children were somehow equivalents of himself, people the system didn't protect. Perversely, in his own mind, Javed Iqbal may have seen himself as proving a point about these children's invisibility, rather than simply exploiting it. The confession letter reads, in part, like an accusation aimed at Pakistani society: "You didn't protect me. You don't protect them. I am showing you who you are." This doesn't make him a social critic. It makes him a monster who constructed a narrative to justify monstrous things. Was he a psychopath? People ask this a lot. The clinical answer is, we don't know. Javed Iqbal was never subjected to the kind of comprehensive psychiatric evaluation that Western criminal justice systems often require before sentencing. What we can observe from behavior and statements. He showed no empathy for his victims. He was methodical and organized. He maintained a functional exterior, a business, relationships, a place in a community, while committing crimes of extraordinary scale. He showed no remorse. He appeared to have been motivated by a desire for recognition as much as by any other impulse: the confession letter, the deliberate choice of a symbolic number, the taunting of police. These are the acts of someone who wanted to be known for what he had done. That last element, the desire to be recognized, to make people see, is perhaps the most chilling. Because it means these 100 children were not the point. They were the message. And that tells you everything you need to know about the depth of Javed Iqbal's evil. Why this case still matters today. Javed Iqbal killed 100 children. The youngest were as young as 6 years old. Their names are recorded in his diary, a diary now held somewhere in Pakistani legal archives. Some of those names were never matched to a missing persons report, because no one ever filed one. Some of those children will never be identified. The case forced Pakistan into a national conversation about street children that had long been avoided. In the years following the trial, several NGOs expanded their work in Lahore and other major cities, specifically focused on registering, protecting, and supporting street children. The Pakistani government, under enormous domestic and international pressure, made some policy changes around child protection and missing persons reporting. Were they enough? No. Were they meaningful? Yes. And that matters. What this case reveals about systems. Javed Iqbal could not have killed 100 children without a system that allowed those children to be invisible. Full stop. Serial killers almost always exploit gaps in social systems. They find the people the system doesn't protect well, the marginalized, the vulnerable, those with less power and fewer connections. This is true in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Pakistan, in every country in which these crimes have occurred. The lesson of Javed Iqbal is not about one man's evil. Evil exists. Monsters appear in every society. The lesson is about the infrastructure of invisibility that allowed 100 disappearances to go unnoticed. The lesson is about street children who had names, histories, dreams, and deserved to be counted. Remembering the victims. Before we end, I want to say something that gets lost in the horror of the perpetrator's story. These 100 boys were real. They had favorite foods and street games they played at dusk. They had older brothers or younger sisters somewhere in Pakistan who wondered what happened to them. They had moments of joy before the end. They existed. Javed Iqbal wanted to erase them so completely that even their physical forms would be gone. He succeeded in the physical sense. But he could not erase the fact that they lived. That they mattered. That the outrage over what happened to them, the protests, the coverage, the policy changes, the decades of true crime documentaries including this one, is evidence that society eventually counted them. Too late. Imperfectly. But they were counted. I believe that matters. That was the story of Javed Iqbal, Pakistan's most prolific serial killer. A case that combined systemic failure, targeted evil, a shocking confession, and questions of justice that have no easy answers. If this video made you think, not just about the crimes, but about the systems that surround them, then it did its job. If you're new here, this channel covers true crime and dark history with the depth it deserves. We don't do jump scares. We don't exploit victims. We try to understand, because understanding is the only thing that actually helps. Subscribe if you want more. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you want to go deeper on Pakistani crime history, check out, link video on screen, our video on related case. In the comments, I want to hear your thoughts, specifically on the question of justice in this case. Was the judge's sentence, however unenforceable, a form of justice? Or does it cross a line? Real question, I read every comment. Until next time, stay curious. Stay safe.